Numerous and complicated as were the instrumentalities employed, and extending over many generations of wonderful history, still they may be all grouped under two fundamental expedients: the selecting, training, and governing of a peculiar people, and the creating and preparing an appropriate home for them. Abraham and Canaan, the Hebrew nation and the land of promise, the long ongoing and outworking of the Mosaic economy, in conjunction with the physical phenomena of their earthly inheritance. By and through all these did the spirit of inspiration evolve and perfect man's religious language. Palestine, fashioned and furnished by the Creator's hand, was the arena, and the people of Israel were the actors brought upon it and made to perform their parts by the Divine Master. When the end and aim had been reached, the language of the kingdom fully developed and matured, the King himself appeared, and the gospel of salvation was sent forth on its high mission of mercy among the nations of the earth. Like other books, the Bible has had a home, a birthplace. But beyond all the examples of this birthplace, has given form and color to its language. The underlying basis of this wonderful dialect of the kingdom of heaven is found in the land itself. But as in the resurrection, that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterward that which is spiritual, so in the process of developing man's religious language, it was preceded by and grew out of the natural and the mundane. From the material and the human were evolved the spiritual and the divine, the material out of which was formed. Our spiritual dialect was of the earth, earthy, requiring to be transformed and transfigured, ere it could become a fit medium for things heavenly. To see and to study to the best advantage this transfiguration of language, we must resort to Palestine, where it was first learned and spoken. That land, we repeat, has had an all-pervading influence upon the costume and character of the Bible. Without the former, the latter, as we now have it, could not have been produced. To ascertain this fact and to notice by what process of analogy and of contrast the physical and the mundane came to signify and illustrate things spiritual and heavenly may well occupy much of our attention during this pilgrimage through the Holy Land. Let us, therefore, deal reverently with it. Walk softly over those acres once trodden by the feet of patriarchs, prophets, and sacred poets, and most of all by the Son of God himself. Let us put off the soiled sandal of worldliness and sin. Let us put off the soiled sandal of worldliness and sin as we enter this consecrated domain. There is design in this grouping of mountains and plains, hills and valleys, lakes and rivers, the desert and the sea, with all their vegetable and animal products, and in the marvelous and miraculous incidents and phenomena in the sacred record. These things were not the result of blind chance, were not merely natural, but beyond and above that, for we see in them the supernatural and the divine. The land and the book constitute the all-perfect text of the Word of God, and can be best studied together. To read the one by the light of the other has been the privilege of the author for more than 40 years, and the governing purpose in publishing it is to furnish additional facilities for this delightful study to those who have not been thus favored. The sights and scenes described in the work were visited many times during the author's long residence in the country, and the results, so far as they bear on biblical illustration, appear in the current narrative. The conversations are held in the open country, on horseback, by the wayside, or beneath the traveler's tent, and the reader is at liberty to regard himself as the compagnon de voyage. For, in the mind of the author, his fellow traveler is not a mythical abstraction whose office is merely to introduce new themes, but a real and true-hearted friend in full sympathy with the purpose and aim of our pilgrimage through the Holy Land. I have been for several days awaiting your I have been here for several days awaiting your arrival, watching the weather. April 4th. I have been here for several days awaiting your arrival, watching the weather with no little anxiety and fearing lest the sea should be too rough to permit of a landing, in which case you would have been taken up to Haifa or even Beirut. That would have been a serious inconvenience to us both, and indeed the captain, after we left Port Said, thought it would very likely occur. And even when anchored in this most unquiet of roadsteads, the prospect of getting on shore was far from encouraging. Only one boat came out to us, and that was so tossed and buffeted by the waves that it was nearly impossible to get into it, and not a little dangerous afterwards. A not uncommon experience, but the storm is now over. You are safe on land, and we may count upon fair weather for some time to come. Let us extricate ourselves from this noisy multitude around the landing. Let us extricate ourselves from this noisy multitude around the landing. Give your keys to our energetic cook, Salim, and with the assistance of our porters, he will pass your baggage through the custom house and bring it to our pleasant quarters in one of Jaffa's far-famed orange gardens. My first view of this land of promise has been gloomy and discouraging to the last degree. A long, low reach of featureless coast, dimly visible through the spray from angry waves, was all that could be seen at early dawn as we approached. Not a hill, nor a house, nor even a boat relieved the dismal solitude, until we reached this tumultuous roadstead in front of the town. I can readily believe, however, that in a calm, clear day Jaffa and its immediate surroundings would present a very pretty and smiling prospect and striking appearance to one approaching from the sea. So I shall make haste to dismiss my first impressions, and with other eyes look upon these scenes as fancy drew and colored them in early boyhood. And even if every prospect does not please, I am resolved to be content with things as I find them and make the best of them. A sensible resolution. a sensible resolution, and one which will not demand any extraordinary amount of self-control to observe. For there are within the borders of the Holy Land lofty mountains covered with snow, hills and valleys and white plains carpeted with gay flowers, lakes, rivers, and streams baptized with beauty, and sacred sights and scenes innumerable, and of the very deepest interest. New and strange they certainly are, at any rate. This street along which we are threading our way with some difficulty and a little danger is a genuine novelty. It is Jaffa's one thoroughfare through which nearly all her commerce to and from the sea has to pass, and as it is narrow and crooked and crowded, one must keep a sharp lookout to avoid unpleasant collisions. Of that we have already been admonished more than once. We were nearly run down by a huge bale of goods, borne along on poles by 8 stout porters, keeping step to a monotonous chant. Our next encounter was with Bedouin Arabs, carrying long spears and riding horses wilder than themselves. We stopped into a shop to let them pass. Yes, and if I had not pushed you suddenly into a recess, you would have had an awkward adventure with that string of loaded camels. My attention was attracted for the moment by a family of young pups lying with their mother in the middle of the narrow street, in imminent danger of being crushed to death, when those camels were fairly upon me ere I was aware of their approach, for their soft, spongy feet give no warning to the wayfarer. Dogs are too numerous in these streets to call for special sympathy, and you will soon learn to let them alone if they will do the same by you. But both they and the camels are very biblical animals, and we shall have frequent occasion to refer to them. At present, let us pass out of the city through this open space in front of what was once Jaffa's only gate. The crowd is more dense, noisy, and picturesque here than within the city. What tempting groups for the pencil or the brush of the artist and the photographer's camera! We shall have opportunity hereafter to contemplate them at our leisure. Therefore, we will continue our walk to the biara that has been placed at our disposal by an old friend who delights in acts of oriental hospitality. What is a biara? It is the local name for an enclosed garden planted with orange and other fruit-bearing trees and irrigated with water from a well or bir. The name is very appropriate, since every tree and bush and flower in the biara depends for its very life upon the water from the bir.